I wouldn't say terrified, but I think they know that the consequences are that their political career will stall in some way if they offend the Zionists. And I don't think it's terror, because I think they've got so used to it that it almost becomes natural, second nature to them.
Rather like the self-censorship of the media.
Yes, yes.
You see, I always attack or say to Arabs and Muslims when they say the Jews control the media, I say, don't, that's rubbish. The media censors itself out of fear of offending Zionism. And you're saying it's the same process in politics.
It's out of fear, and it's out of the desire not to have a lot of hassle.
Key word, hassle.
If you offend a group of people, they will make your life hell. They will email you, they will write to you, they will write articles about you, they will stand outside your office and they will lobby you. And the same thing happens with the Zionist lobby.
Except they're much more efficient.
They are much more efficient. I was going on to say that. They are incredibly efficient. They have a network which is let loose on anybody that says anything about Israel.
Well, the BBC, for example, Kate Adie once revealed this in a speech she made somewhere, she probably got into a hell of a lot of trouble for saying it, that the BBC could receive sometimes 10,000 emails if the Zionist lobby objected to something in a news bulletin.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the sort of thing you're talking about.
Exactly, and I've heard that from people in the BBC too. After I made those remarks, you may remember that the BBC Today programme took me out there, and we did a whole week of talking to suicide bombers' families and talking to the victims, the families of the victims of suicide bombers. Very interesting week. And I gave a sort of 10-minute report on the Today programme for a week. And the reaction to that was absolutely enormous. I mean, the lines were blocked. And so it puts programme makers...
You mean anti-you?
Anti-me,
and anti the BBC,
and anti the BBC for daring to let me have a platform.
And this is all highly organised. Essentially, there are a couple of groups, one in Britain, one in America, that do arrange for emails to come in from all over the world.
Yes, it is extraordinarily efficient, and it's very intimidating, and it is also very expensive for the person involved.
How much is the fear of being falsely accused of anti-Semitism also another prime reason why so many Western politicians speak from Zionism script?
I think it's almost more important than the hassle factor. I think there is an inborn dread in all of us for the sort of sentiments that led to the Holocaust in the Second World War.
So
those
it's guilt.
Sentiments to come back. It's guilt and a determination that it will never happen again. Of course, you know, some people would say it has happened again in other parts of the world. But that has to be the worst episode in human history.
So, but there's nothing that frightens politicians more.
Nothing. No one. And I don't think I've ever met anyone who was anti-Semitic in the accepted term. I really don't. But a lot of people are very, very troubled indeed about the activities of Israel in the occupied territory.
Yeah, let's come on to that secondly, shortly. The point that we're making is that it is the fear of being falsely accused of being anti-Semitic.
And I am being accused all the time. I have been stopped attending meetings, stopped speaking, addressing meetings, because people on the boards of organisations have said, no, you mustn't have that woman. She's
because you're anti-Semitic or you're promoting.
I'm anti-Semitic, which is a complete...
Do you know there's a word for that? It's called blackmail.
It's called blackmail, of course it is.
You have suggested that another prime cause of the fear of offending Zionism on the part of politicians is money. Now, in September 2006, at your party's conference, you said the pro-Israel lobby has got its financial grips on the Western world and our party. Now, I
said it may have its grip on our party.
Our party, right, okay, well that wasn't in the quote I read, but never mind. Now, I presume you would not have made that statement if you didn't have a good reason, or quite a good reason for saying it. Can you share with us on the record the good reason?
I think it's worth sharing. I mean, first of all, the basis. People were asking, why is this allowed to happen? Why don't people recognise what's going on? Why are we so afraid of being called anti-Semitic? And I had just read the famous paper that led to the book by Walt and Mearsheimer in America,
The Israel
called
Lobby.
The Israel Lobby, which is all about the antics of AIPAC, the American Israel Committee, which raises funds, really in many, many ways controls American politics. It has a very, very, very heavy hand on.
Yes, they didn't quite say controls American politics. They said it has the controlling voice in the determination of American policy for the Arab-Israeli conflict.
It also controls American politics in the sense that not many American politicians would survive without the support of AIPAC.
You cannot run for office.
Exactly.
The president, the Congress, the mayor, the sheriff.
Exactly. Senators, congressmen alike,
Yeah.
all look for support from AIPAC.
Yeah.
So in a sense it does control it. And I had realised that in this country there is a lot of evidence that the same thing happens to a lesser extent. The same thing happens. A huge amount of fundraising will go on. There is an organisation called Labour Friends of Israel, Conservative Friends of Israel, Liberal Democrat Friends of Israel. They're very, very powerful groups within each of our main political parties. There's nothing wrong with that. I don't want people to think that I think lobbying is necessarily evil. There's nothing illegal
There
about
are many,
it.
many lobbyists.
There are many lobbyists. There are many lobbyists. I mean, I think that the countryside lobby and the next one that springs to mind, the anti-nuclear lobby. But these people have an organisation within each of our main political parties. They, at the lowest level, they will deliver leaflets, they will help the MP, they will sponsor trips. The organisation sponsors trips to Israel for MPs to see the situation for themselves
From an Israeli
perspective. And they also do a lot of fundraising. And again, other groups do that. I mean, if you're in British politics, you're thinking about fundraising the whole of the time.
Okay, so what makes Zionist fundraising different from other fundraising?
Well, they do it so much more efficiently. Like everything they do it very efficiently. They raise a lot of money for the party. And there has, I think it's quite open, because Jasmine Alibaba-Brown and other commentators in Britain are now starting to say, what is the function of these people? And what is the function of both Tony Blair's and Gordon Brown's chief fundraisers, and their political offices are all headed by very wealthy and influential Zionists. Now, you know, we need to ask ourselves, if this should happen, and if it is happening, and it's quite legitimate, if that is influencing the foreign policy of our government.
But do you believe it is?
I believe it is, and I think it influences the foreign policy of all political parties.
Jenny,
and that worries me terribly, and I dare say I shall get into huge trouble for saying that.
Let me put this to you. There's a case for saying that Prime Minister Tony Blair Zionized British foreign policy more completely than any of his predecessors. And the essence of the case is this. He came into office determined to reduce his party